This is episode 71 of the Get in My Garden podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Moskowitz, and today we meet my new friend, Kyle Perry, second-generation horticulturist and regenerative farmer based in Tennessee. We discuss his new businesses, Beer-Kashi and Native Soil Company, and learn about the double fermented kashi he is creating from spent brewery grains. Then we talk about his fungal-dominant soil product he has created and the awesome bioreactor he is using. We also talk about the alternative uses for kashi grain, a little bit about no-till farming, and vermicomposting. You can find Kyle and his companies online, nativesoilco.com and at BeerKashi on Instagram. Follow this podcast at Get in My Garden, and sign up for the newsletter on getinmygarden.com. Later this week, the amazing and talented Woniya Thibault, primitive skills expert and survivalist, competitor and runner-up on season 6 of the History Channel show called Alone, which is also available on Netflix, will join us to discuss how we can all become closer to the earth and gain primitive skills. Then next week, we have the second half of my interview with Elton James and Kyle Perry.
Hey, how are you?
Good. Nice to cyber meet you.
Yeah, pleasure's all ours. Thanks for reaching out.
Of course. Do you want to give everybody a bio of yourself and tell us about the projects that you're working on?
Yeah, no problem. I guess we'll start. I'm a second-generation horticulturist, and I do most of regenerative farming and Korean natural farming, more natural farming practices, ultra low-cost farming, Jadam, if you're familiar with that. I started Beer-Kashi, Bokashi Composting Company, about a year or so ago. And then since then, I'm doing a living soil that's geared towards indoor cannabis, native soil company, and do some really cool stuff with that as well. We're actually growing the soil in these bioreactors. I think I talked to you a little bit about that the other day.
Yeah.
Funny enough, they're actually Dr. Johnson, David Johnson, he's actually from New Mexico University.
Really? Oh, okay.
He's a director of regenerative agriculture. And him and his wife, they put together this bioreactor to make a fungal dominant compost. And it's really, really cool. The end result is almost like a clay instead of a fluffy compost, and a very high fungal count. He uses this in his regenerative projects. He's pushing, fungal dominant. A lot of, our soils, there's bacteria everywhere, but the fungal counts are just very, very low. And so, he's pushing that really hard, and just a really cool guy. A lot of good information from him, and the reactors are awesome. I'm not sure if there's anybody who's actually growing soil in the reactors. Doing a living soil, it's not necessarily just a composted super soil. But we're actually growing these in bioreactors.
That's totally wild sounding. I mean, what does that look like? Can you describe the device and what exactly takes place?
So it's about 6 foot cylindrical. We use a cattle wire all the way around. And so it's just this big cylindrical, reactor, and you put big tubes down into there, PVC pipes, and you want to space them around. And then once you fill the bioreactor up, you wait about a day, and then you pull the tubes out. And then so it's an aerobic composting reactor. So, and then what we do is we irrigate it once a day for about 10 to 15 minutes. And the result is after about 1 year, you got to wait 1 year. You got to have patience. These things. After 1 year, you're left with this. It's almost like a clay, which is just highly fungal dominant. And so, you use this in your teas, spreading around on the farm. And yeah, lots of really cool stuff.
How are you planning on shipping that? Is that something that's easy to package up and get to people?
The way that we're not actually doing the compost. It takes about a year to use for the bioreactors to finish into its a finished product. But our soil that we're growing, we're kind of doing a hybrid system. And it, about 3 or 4 months in the reactors is about the sweet spot for us. And then we pull a bioreactor down, and then we bag the soil. And so we do that kind of on demand just to keep it really, fresh and alive. And yeah, it's great. It's really, really cool. Native Soil Company. Check it out. We're kind of just, I'm just getting our little start there. But the Beer-Kashi is also in it as well. And so we feature that with it. And I know you're really big on the Bokashi, forefront now. It's so awesome. It's great stuff.
Yeah, just 2 years ago, most people hadn't heard of it, I think. And now it's really taking off. Maybe I'm biased because all of my Instagram seems to be focused around soil, but like I really do think it's peaking and now most people have heard of it in some way.
Yeah, it's great. It's really kind of one of the forefront movements of, putting the power back into the farmer's hand, teaching everybody like, hey, you don't necessarily have to buy a bottle of nutrients to put on your plants. You can easily access this stuff depending on where you're at. Not everybody gets to live out in the country and have access to, wild and native plants like we do. Some are, inner city and, so we just offer a chance to help them do some stuff. The Bokashi composting, you can do indoors. It's really easy. It's a very low to no smell technique that you can compost cheeses with. I mean, you can put, small amounts of oil inside of there. Mm-hmm. Meat as well. I was doing an experiment and I just plopped a whole pizza down on there. And then, man, after a couple of weeks, it was almost nothing. And there's a 2-stage process to the Bokashi composting as well, where after a couple of weeks of fermentation, you'll actually bury it in the ground. And so,
right.
Again, not everybody has access, to go outside and take a shovel and dig a big hole. But, you can get by with that, by like buying a big container. And then, just keeping it in your house if you're brave enough to dedicate that, or, your wife doesn't have a problem with it.
Wow. So if that were the next step of composting, basically the Bokashi is like fermenting it, right? So it's like you're creating a fermentation that is going to expedite all the composting.
Absolutely. It's an anaerobic form of composting. So, you're not turning it like you would in a regular compost pile. And, the results, you get very, very quick results with it. You're basically inoculating your food with, microorganisms and beneficial bacteria that will survive in an anaerobic condition. And then as they compost it down after a few weeks, then you dig a hole and you put it back in there. And, a total of, 4 to 5 weeks and you have compost that's ready to use.
Gotcha.
So it cuts down the time tremendously. And it's easy to, kind of keep a bucket underneath your sink. So, you just throw all your scraps in there. I personally, I'm a lazy farmer. I like, I love farming, but, I love spending time with my family as well. And I try to regulate and balance it as much as possible. But, I'd rather spend time with my friends and family more than gardening. I try to make it as most efficient as possible.
Yeah.
And the Bokashi composting is, it's really easy. I don't have to go over and put it in my compost pile outside. I just throw it underneath in a bucket, and let it roll. Throw some kashi on top, then off to the next thing.
So can you describe that? So you're getting the beer, the spent grain from the breweries, right?
Yeah. Really cool. When I kind of thought about it, it's, traditional kashi is used with like a, wheat bran or something like that, or, a mill run, really whatever you can find. As natural farmers, we try to just use what we have, our natural resources. This helps us build a community. Knowing, okay, well, the pig farmer's over here, I can go get stuff over there. And then my buddy does vegetables over there. And so really allows you to meet the community. And I'm always about reaching out. I reach out to several people a day, just, hey, what you doing? I really like your garden.
That's awesome.
Let's see how we can drive those numbers down and your production up. And so, but the Beer-Kashi, I was, in Nashville where I'm at, we're about 30 minutes west out of Nashville. We have tons of breweries out here. Tons of them. And, most of these farmers have contracts. Most of the beer companies have contracts out to farmers where they'll use it as, additional feed. Mm-hmm. So, they are they're really just creating to more organic waste and not really doing anything beneficial. And so teaching these farmers like, hey, we can take something that's just kind of given off. We can ferment this off and even make it more beneficial. So you're creating that beneficial runoff. You can use it for chicken feed. We throw it in the coops. We give it to the goats, throw it out and let birds eat it because, all that's going through their digestive system. Not only, providing probiotics and, helping out with everything, their microflora, but also they're redistributing that back into waterways and back into the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just this beautiful cycle. And, you don't necessarily have to end it. And so if we take this and ferment it, then we can kind of continue the process of how those beneficial bacteria and microbes cleaning up our waterways, help land regeneration and remineralization.
That's so awesome. And how does that product, are you dehydrating it? Does it still hold the same?
We dry it out as soon as we get it.
Uh-huh.
Then I'll inoculate everything. And then we'll put it off into a solid state fermentation for a couple of weeks. And then I'll pull it out and dry it out again. But what I do is I like to double ferment my grains. Not a lot of kashi. As the kashi wave is coming. You've seen a lot of kashis available, and they're all great. I mean, there's not one bad bokashi out there in a sense. They're all really great, and they're all kind of tailored a little bit different. But the main idea is there. So with all this waste coming out, from these breweries here, it's like, hey, let's take this and make an agricultural product with it. And
that's awesome.
You can still feed it to your animals, for all these farmers here. But it has beneficial effects now.
Yeah.
And so we're actually working with it's called the Tennessee Sustainable Spirits Program, and there's some really cool guys with the Department of Agriculture here in Tennessee who are teaching these breweries how to just be more efficient and more sustainable, and how they can lessen their footprint. So, which it falls just in line with Beer-Kashi and everything. And so
that's so cool.
It's really great that, a lot of these, not just brewers, but the farmers are kind of coming along with this as well. I love to teach it. Nothing that I have is proprietary. I was taught how to do this, and I love teaching people how to do this because that's where the real benefit comes from,
I agree. And most people want to support each other, so they'd probably be interested in supporting you and your business too.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they don't necessarily want to do it in the same, they want to learn about it, but they don't necessarily want to do it.
Yes. Yeah. Or have the time or means to, I mean, a lot of these farmers are incredibly busy, and they don't have time to dry beer grains and then stick them on.
Totally.
Ferment them, and they're off busy doing lots of other things. So that's when it's best, and just go ahead and if you want to pick some up, buy it. But I'd love to teach you how to make it, so you can really keep those numbers down and keep the profit up.
That's awesome. Well, can you describe all the different things that people are using them for? So obviously it's like a supplement for animal feed. Because it's like a probiotic, but and then I think most people who research it might see small scale things happening where people use it in their kitchen, but farmers are using it too. So
yeah, and we're from a small scale to a large scale. I mean, there's so many different benefits that you can use from bigger kind of ag sense. This, redistributing this over your land. I have a buddy who does a lot of biodynamic farming and regenerative farming as well. And, he's like, well, how do we get this on a bigger and larger scale? Process of making the kashi. Of course, we have almost an unlimited amount, coming from these breweries here. One of the big breweries, they do about 10,000 tons a day.
Holy crap.
But, all of this, extra resources that we have, can become really beneficial. From the big ag sense to even just the small farmer, we throw this in our chicken coops to help create, a living floor. We also use, a lot of Korean natural farming techniques there. The IMO collections, if you're familiar with that, fermented plant juices, which we add into our kashi as well. And so, we throw them in the horse stall. They have the microbes will actually break down the organic material and eliminating your smells. So, no smell piggeries. A lot of people are doing in the natural farming sense, throwing in their chicken coops. I give it to my dogs. I throw a little bit in with their dog food, and they go relieve themselves outside. And man, that pile, in a day or two, it's just covered in this beautiful mycelium bloom and starting to break down. So not only are they only getting the benefits from the probiotics, but, I don't have to walk through a lot of landmines anymore. They seem to kind of just disappear.
So what about for cannabis? Because so that's going to be the product that you're kind of focusing on, at least with your soil. So can you explain, obviously natural farming is huge amongst cannabis growers, but what is it exactly? What results do people get normally with those changes?
There's lots of benefits. I mean, you can use it as a tea. So, if you really want to kind of stretch it out, you can make a kashi tea. I build a lot of living soil beds. And so, within these beds, these no-till beds, there's a lot of organic material that starts to get piled up. And so with the addition of the kashi, it's just basically jump starting and helping everything kind of break down. And so, whether you want to use it for a tea application, feeding your worms, if you're doing any type of worm farming, I suggest everybody get into some vermiculture. It's pretty fun stuff. But another way to get rid of your waste, not necessarily waste, but turn it into something, beneficial.
Can you start with kashi and then go to vermicompost?
Well, you can add it into your worms. Love the kashi. It's really interesting too, because I've done a lot of experiments, without fermenting the beer grains. Funny enough, worms, they don't like the grains really that much. You think about it and it's like, this must be a great food source from them, but they just don't like them until you ferment them off. And then they just become these, delicate little food sources that the worms, love. So, you can add it into your vermiculture, any type of, even if you're running like an aquaponic system, making your teas with this, is a great thing. So, lots of applications for it. I make a tea sometimes and I'll pour it down my drain to help, with the smells from the drain and just help unclog things too. So,
thanks for listening in. Later in the week, we will hear from Woniya Thibault of Buckskin Revolution. And then next week, more from Kyle Perry and Elton James. Subscribe to the show wherever you listen from to get the latest episodes. And leave positive reviews if you want to support the show. And sign up on getinmygarden.com if you want to join the insanely awesome email list. Until next time.